welcome into the finale of our Senior Bowl coverage. Paige DeMacco's here for the Draft Network, and I have John Ledyard and Brad Kelly, and we are very thankful for Mercedes-Benz Corporate Sales. We've been out here for a couple days. It's not as cold as it was the other day when we were on, and I was actually shivering. Beautiful is not a word I would use to describe it right now, but it's okay. It's mildly okay. How you guys doing?
January day for this Pennsylvania boy.
Yeah,
let's put it that way.
Everything's about John. He said it's
I'm a Northeast boy, so I'm the same way.
There we go.
All right, so I got to get the Florida boys and the other guys up here that agree with me that it's been a little bit cold. But guys, we're coming to the end. It's the last show. So how are we feeling?
I'm feeling really good. I think that Brad and I, when we were talking about what do we want to focus on today from this practice, especially, was the wide receiver group. It's just been so impressive across the board. I know we've got more under the radar guys that we want to get to, Brad, but we'd be remiss if we didn't start off by saying how good Deebo Samuel's been this week. A guy that I didn't think had his best season this past year, but got better. I think got healthier as the year went on, stayed kind of healthy toward the end of the season, finished on a high note. The Clemson game was dynamic, and then has picked up where he left off and been excellent here as well. He's been a monster this week.
I went into this week and we had this conversation. I thought that he was a top 5 receiver in this class, the class of the position at the Senior Bowl, and I think he went out and proved it in every facet, and especially today, I thought he had the best day out of anybody.
Guys, there's a specific guy that I've heard about quite a bit. His name's Penny Hart, and I've heard about him quite a bit from everybody. Brad, I'll let you start here. What are your thoughts on what Penny's done this week?
I thought he had a great week, especially in the slot with his smooth route breaks. He really showed that despite his lack of size, only 5'8", 180, it doesn't really come back to bite him very much because he's so electric and so smooth. And I think he looked better than other slot receivers here, such as Andy Isabella. I think he really helped himself.
John, you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's been dynamic this week. I think creating space in his release off the line of scrimmage, but also in his route stems, in his route breaks. This was a kid who didn't have great production. I think, what, 2 600-yard seasons or so at Georgia State. So the production wasn't amazing. When he got voted up to the Senior Bowl, I know you and I were like, man, there's other receivers we feel like we'd rather see there, but I feel like we're both a little bit embarrassed about that now because Hart was so good this week and he was so explosive. No corner here could lock him down. I just think overall, when you talk about players who helped themselves any position the most out of who was in the Senior Bowl, Penny Hart's got to be atop the list.
So he's a guy you guys are both excited about then. Well, you guys are both agreeing. Okay, how about Terry McLaurin? What are your thoughts on him and what he's done this week?
I'm going to have to revisit his film because what I saw today and what I saw this whole week, he was a top 10 receiver in this class. I mean, I think he's safely in the top 10. Right. I mean, he was open on every play. He never had a bad rep. Not necessarily saying everything was complete, but he did not get overpowered or overshadowed by the corner any rep of one-on-ones or 7-on-7 for 3 straight practices. He said today was his best day. He said at Ohio State, his coach Brian Hartline really helped him develop, focus on every single play, coming in and out, effort on every play, and it really showed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's been absolutely dynamic, Paige. If you see what he's done in terms of creating separation this week, plus the speed to win vertically, that's the question with these guys. Do they have great athletic traits? They might be able to get open in short areas, but do they have great athletic traits? Can they go up and win the ball in the air? Can they win vertically down the field? To me, that was the big thing I wanted to see with McLaurin, and I felt like I saw that this week. Man, he was torching people, running by Corey Ballantyne the first day of practice. I mean, just throughout the week, I thought every single practice seemed to get better and better and better, and the first one was good. So he right up there with Penny Hart, big winners, and I hadn't watched him on tape yet, so I'm really excited to get to his tape now.
Yeah, we like when guys get better throughout the week. That's the whole purpose of being out here. How about Jacoby Myers, Brad? Let's talk about him. What did you see this week, and was he what you expected this week?
So he's a very interesting evaluation because he played mostly in the slot, but he has good length, he has good size, he has really good footwork. I think this week he did struggle sometimes on the outside, but other times his footwork could really embarrass the corner. So he's definitely a slot player and maybe some reps on the outside and at the next level, but I know that his feet, his size, and the way he can, it was in flashes at NC State, but there were the flashes of vertically down the field of him winning. I think that's going to be his role at the next level, that big slot type.
Yeah, he didn't look as dynamic all around as an athlete as McLaurin or Hart, maybe not quite as explosive, but good, clean footwork. I think Brad's right. He did most of his work in the slot at NC State, so he's like a big slot type of receiver, and I think that might be his best spot in the NFL, but I would like to see him. I am a little more interested, I think, maybe than even Brad at seeing him on the outside. I thought he did okay against press coverage this week. It's going to be an adjustment for him just because he didn't see it a lot in the slot at NC State, but I think he has enough quickness and enough versatility within his game, enough strength. He's a bigger guy, like you said, I think the traits are there for him to be better against press and play on the outside some, but I do love him as an inside receiver, as a slot guy potentially moving forward. I think that could be a really good role for him in the NFL.
Which of the three guys was most impressive this week that we just went through before we get to the last guy?
I think probably, if I'm going to get, I'm probably McLaurin, but Hart was also amazing.
I would agree, yeah.
Brad?
McLaurin for sure. I mean, I was so impressed with him, his consistency, and he has it all.
All right, the last guy we're going to talk about is Gary Jennings. Brad, I'll let you start. Thoughts on him and what his week was like?
So on day one, he was 1 for 4 in the one-on-one periods. I didn't think much of him, but then I went back to the film, and of the South team receivers, he was the fastest one. And he went vertically twice, and he got overthrown. I was like, oh, that was why he went 1 for 4. And then throughout the week, you saw that speed. Today, right down the red zone, you saw goal line fades, going up high pointing the football. This is a guy who's 6'2", 215, can run through tackles, great vertical receiver, and he has experience as an underneath guy. Really, his junior year, that was more of his spot on the offense. Really racked up the catches at more than 90. So this is a guy who's really versatile, good size, very, very fast in a straight line.
Yeah, I think we're talking about a guy that's more raw probably than the guys we've talked about already. There's great traits though, like Brad said, the size, the strength, the speed. I saw him live when I was there in Oklahoma and WVU. I was at West Virginia to watch those play, and he blew my mind. He had an amazing game, I think over 200 yards receiving. He was speed down the field, to the ability to beat corners who were trying to be physical with him. I just thought he showed everything, ability after the catch. I just need to see more of it on a consistent basis with him. I think his game is not as well developed as the guys who we talked about previously. So I think it's going to be about him getting in an NFL system that molds him and coaching that molds him, because there's awesome traits there, better traits than his more heralded teammate, David Sills, I think. But I think it's going to be getting in the right fit for him to really thrive at the next level.
Any parting thoughts, guys? Because I'm about to kick you off and bring in a new crew. So any parting thoughts on Senior Bowl week as we wrap up our video coverage here?
I can only think about Debo. What a week for him. But he was far from the only one. Hunter Renfrow also really good in the wide receiver group. Really impressed by some of the things he did. Andy Isabella, we have some concerns, I think, but at the same time, I thought he had a pretty strong week.
As well, yeah, me too. And like you said, it's all about Debo, man. I can't wait to go back and watch more of him. He's incredible.
All right, it's all about Debo. It's all about Debo for both guys. Something we did yesterday was we got into a mock draft, and it was a lot of fun. So what you guys are going to see coming up at the break, you're going to see picks 1 through 10, and if you want to see the whole thing, you can head on over to the Draft Network on Twitter, and you can check that out. But we'll be right back, and I'm bringing the draftees in. You know those guys, Kyle and Joe. We'll be right back.
Trevor Sikkema here to recap the first 10 picks of TDN's live mock draft from here at the Senior Bowl. Started off with Arizona, the Cardinals taking the #1 player on the board, Quinnen Williams from Alabama. That means San Francisco got Nick Bosa from Ohio State, the edge rusher they needed at #2. New York Jets settled with Josh Allen to be their edge rusher of the future. Oakland got a very good player in linebacker Devin White from LSU. Tampa Bay fixed their interior defensive line, getting one of the most talented players in the draft class with Ed Oliver. The Giants got a lot meaner up front in the trenches, picking Cody Ford at #6. Jacksonville gets the quarterback that they hope will be the heir apparent to Blake Bortles at #7. Detroit grabbing Cleveland Farrell, going edge rusher over corner at that pick #8. Jonah Williams going to Buffalo. They ended up bolstering the trenches over picking a playmaker, maybe a wide receiver. That's a good pick there. And then Denver taking their quarterback, Drew Lock, John Elway taking a swing and maybe his franchise guy. Stick around for picks 11 through 32 coming up later in the show.
Welcome back to the Draft Network Senior Bowl coverage. Paige DeMacos, and guess who I brought in with me? Guess who I brought in?
What's better than this?
Oh, I was hoping you would get into that. That's the drafted. Kyle, Joe, my boys are here. I'm excited that you guys are here. It's the last show. I can't believe we're to the end. So parting thoughts, like what has this week been like for you guys before we get into Montez Sweat?
Well, it's been a good week. Unfortunately we had the missed practices on Wednesday, but really this was a really good assessment window for these players. This was not necessarily a star-studded group like we've seen in some of the recent years, but it's a lot of players that had a lot to gain with strong performances, and I think a lot of those guys did that even if they weren't necessarily very consistent on a day-to-day basis.
Joe?
We're here to talk about defense, but it's rare that the offensive line group is a standout. I liked a lot of these guys. The Charlotte guy, Nate Davis, both the Wisconsin guards, Ben Schwazel and Dieter. A lot of Garrett Bradbury had a good week. Elgin Jenkins,
my guy, Chris
Eric
Lindstrom.
McCoy, Chris Lindstrom. So the offensive linemen, a week that's very difficult for offensive linemen to impress. The group looked great.
All right, we like the offensive line. That's what the boys like. But we're going to get into defense, and we're going to talk about somebody that you've already heard a little bit about, and that's Montez Sweat. Sweat. Joe, I'll let you start here. What did you see from him this week?
You know, Brad and John did a great job talking about Deebo Samuel as the offensive winner this week. The defensive winner was Montez Sweat. He checked a lot of the boxes we hoped he would this week. Showed up with long arms, over 35 inches, nearly 36. A lot of production, over 30 tackles for loss in the SEC this year, the last 2 years, as well as 20 sacks. So this is a guy that's been productive at the highest level, and he came here and really illustrated the traits that made him a dynamic player in the SEC. Long arms, great technique, good vision. Now, he doesn't have a lot of bend. That's going to be the concern with him, but he knows how to soften rush angles and get around that outside hip. This is a guy that helped himself a ton.
Kyle, any thoughts on Montez Sweat?
Yeah, I think Sweat's an interesting player. He's kind of had the ebbs and flows that you see throughout the course of the draft circuit. Coming into this season, he was highly regarded. People realized he had some limitations. Then he has a great weigh-in, and everybody's back up on him again. Yeah. So it's one of those natural progressions with a lot of players. Joe, we talk about it all the time. A guy like Mike McGlinchey last year from Notre Dame, who entered the season as the top offensive tackle. He gave up 2 sacks against Georgia, and all of a sudden he's a second-round player. He ends up going in the top 10. Montez Sweat, I think where he entered the season is about where I expect he's going to end up getting his name called when it's all said and done.
How about Colin Sanders, another guy you guys want to get into? What have you seen from him this week, and what do you need to see from him going forward to maybe move his draft stock up?
This is one of those guys, when I mention, had a lot to gain, had something to prove. Colin Sanders is a small school defensive tackle who had a very good weigh-in, and his press conference was super impressive. He's talking about a lot of community outreach stuff that he has going on and helping underprivileged kids. He gets it. So an upstanding personality like that in your locker room is great. And then you get him on the football field, and he's got a good first step. This is the 320-pound dude that can do a standing backflip. I could do it off the balcony we're on right now and break my neck because I wouldn't get all the way around.
Yeah, that's impressive for a small guy, but it's really impressive when you're a big guy. Joe, what have you seen from him?
For Saunders, he's a tank. This is a guy that can move, and he's got a lot of power, and he converts speed to power really well. Yes. He truly challenged the anchor of these offensive linemen, a guy that I think can really push the pocket.
All right, let's talk about somebody from my neck of the woods. That's Renell Wren from ASU. Joe, I'll let you kick this off. Ooh, I like the eyes. He is a little John Gruden there. So what do we like about Renell Wren?
You know, Wren's a guy that he's a first off the bus type player. When your team gets off and the other team gets eyes on your players, you want Renell Wren to be the first guy they see. We talked a lot. We've been on the road for 2 weeks now. We did Shrine Game last week, and on the Senior Bowl this week, we had a lot of conversations with people about body composition and looking the part. And sometimes that seems like a funny statement, but these guys got to look the part, and that really says to their preparation and if they really fit the mold. Wren's a guy that looks the part. He has the physical attributes, the consistency really needs to improve. He's a guy that he gives you some run defense upside, but the pass rush, a guy with his prototype, with his athletic ability, hidden flashes, the things that he does, he should be more productive as a pass rusher. I thought the ups and downs that we saw at Arizona State, we saw him this week in Mobile.
Kyle, do you agree?
Yeah, I think he's still learning what to do with his hands. He doesn't really approach a lot of plays with a deliberate plan. That's going to be part of his transition to the next level.
All right, you get to talk about DRUE TRANQUILL. What did you see from him, Notre Dame boy?
Joe talking about looking the part. Yeah. DRUE TRANQUILL looks the part of an NFL linebacker. I see some parallels between him and Alex Anzalone, who came through the Senior Bowl a couple years ago as a guy who struggled through injuries throughout the course of his college career. He's more athletic than you think. He showed up, he carries his weight extremely well. And he's not afraid to play physical, and he's not afraid to play in space. He had some coverage productivity at Notre Dame. Now, he's not the loosest in the hips, so he's not going to be a turn and run guy that's going to carry guys up the field. But as a 3-down linebacker, I think he does have some potential as long as his medical's clear.
That's been the point you and I watched. We're all about watching the hip mobility. Yes. We wanted to see we want to see what the guys are able to do, and I think a couple of them need to come hang out with me at yoga a little bit more often. What did you see from him?
You know, for Tranquil, I think he did what he needed to do in terms of looking the part, like Kyle said, but also moving well, like you guys had mentioned, showing some ability in space. A guy that, again, the medicals are going to be the key for teams being comfortable with him.
How about Thornhill? I'm going to let you take this one to kick things off. You look at you.
Swooning.
Oh, I love that. I like a swoon.
Selling this a little.
Jeff Crush, heart.
I like Juan Thornhill, but one thing I am is objective with my analysis.
Okay.
Thornhill's the guy that moved from cornerback to safety this past season because he has some limitations in terms of his movement skills and mobility. I thought that was exposed a lot this week. When he was in man coverage reps against tight ends, and there's a lot of space that he has to cover, he really struggled to remain in phase from time to time. Now, when we did team stuff and he was working in zones and there was layered coverage and his processing skills and his ability to overlap coverage was on display, I thought those were his best moments. He does a good job of reading the eyes of the quarterback, working into passing lanes. But again, I think there's some concerns maybe with some of his man coverage upside. And if we're talking about a first-round safety, like some people are billing him as, there's some concerns with that.
Kyle, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree, and I think the Senior Bowl environment is challenging for safeties in general. We saw this same kind of thing play out with Nasir Adderley from Delaware throughout the course of the entire week. They're trying to get him man-to-man reps. Even as a former corner, he's just not polished in that capacity, and like Adderley, Thornhill struggled a little bit in that area.
All right, the last guy we're going to talk about is Anthony Nelson from Iowa. I'll let you take this one, Kyle.
Yeah, it's my turn to swoon.
Your turn to swoon.
Anthony Nelson, I really like this kid. He's big, like legit 6'7". He's very physical at the point of attack. He didn't necessarily shine today in the one-on-ones. Some of the offensive linemen, as Joe said, it's rare to see offensive linemen get the best of pass rushers so consistently, but Anthony Nelson didn't have a lot of success today on Thursday with the one-on-ones, didn't show a lot of creativity with his rushes. But at the same time, you turn on the film, you see he softens pass rush angles because of his power and his ability to press those offensive tackles back into the backfield.
Joe?
Yeah, you know, one thing that's exciting about Nelson is I think he has inside and outside pass rush ability. NFL defenses want to be multiple with the fronts that they run, and Nelson's a guy that doesn't have any limitations in terms of where you can line him up and give you that pass rushing ability.
Guys, we've reached the end of you guys being here. Listen, I would have to kick Trevor and Ben out and not let them come in. And
that sounds good.
I know it sounds good to you guys. Any parting thoughts on this week in Senior Bowl other than the defense and what we just talked about?
You know, like I said, Deebo Samuel, the offensive winner, Montez Sweat, the defensive winner, and overall, I mean, just a lot of strong performances from some guys that we were familiar with, but getting them isolated in these situations on a level playing field, we learned a lot about these prospects in general.
Yeah, my two biggest winners this week are Terry McLaurin, the wide receiver from Ohio State, and Dalton Risner, the offensive lineman from Kansas State. He took offense. He's been reading the tweets, and he's read that people don't think he's an offensive tackle. But he came out with something to prove today, and he was a dog today. He got after folks.
Scrappy.
I'm all about reading the receipts. I'm all about doing that, so I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of when the athletes are trying to prove a point. We love that. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to be back soon, and guess what? We've got more mock draft stuff coming to you. That's 11 through 32. You're going to see all of those mock draft, and if you want to see the whole thing, it's on Twitter. Go to the Draft Network LLC on Twitter, and you can see the whole thing, but we will be back right after this break.
Kyle Krabs of the Draft Network here to review picks 11 through 20 for yesterday's live mock draft. At 11, the Cincinnati Bengals selected athletic linebacker Mack Wilson. At 12, the Green Bay Packers selected pass rusher Brian Burns. The Miami Dolphins selected quarterback Kyler Murray to be their quarterback of the future at 13. The Atlanta Falcons bolstered their defensive line with defensive tackle Jeffrey Simmons of Mississippi State. The Redskins added to their wide receiver core, adding DK Metcalf, wide receiver 1, at number 15 overall. The Panthers followed suit, selecting Kelvin Harmon from NC State at 16. The Browns picked Byron Murphy, corner from Washington, to pair with last year's top 5 pick, Denzel Ward. The Minnesota Vikings added Yadi Kajust at number 18. The Tennessee Titans added pass rusher Ja'Kai Polite at 19. The Pittsburgh Steelers added Greedy Williams to their secondary at 20 overall. The Seattle Seahawks added Rashawn Gary to their defensive line at 21. The Baltimore Ravens added wide receiver Marquise Brown to pair with Lamar Jackson at 22. The Texans added help for Deshaun Watson with offensive tackle Andre Dillard at 23. The Raiders selected pass rusher Montez Sweat to help replace the loss of Khalil Mack prior to this past season at 24. The Philadelphia Eagles selected safety Nasir Adderley from Delaware at 25, while the Indianapolis Colts selected Clemson defensive tackle Christian Wilkins. The Raiders added athletic tight end Noah Fant from Iowa at 27. The Chargers adding Clemson defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence to help bolster their run defense. The Kansas City Chiefs bolstered their secondary at 29 with Georgia corner DeAndre Baker. The Green Bay Packers added athletic two-way tight end TJ Hawkinson at 30.
The New England Patriots added Texas defensive lineman Charles Omenihu, while the LA Rams drafted Michigan linebacker Devin Bush with the 32nd and final pick of the first round.
Welcome back to the Draft Network Senior Bowl coverage brought to you by Mercedes-Benz Corporate Sales. I am joined by Trevor Sigma and Ben Solak. Guys, we've reached the end. It's the final segment. You guys are here. I brought the A-team in. So guys, how are we feeling?
We're the closers, right?
You're the closers.
Brought in the right people.
It's a little nippy out, Paige. But you know what?
You don't gotta tell her. We're
bring
warm
the best
weather.
out.
Yeah, this is the warm weather crowd.
Yes.
So we're really sucking it up.
Chicago, Illinois, baby.
All right.
Yeah,
Driving it.
Yeah, you don't have any excuses. I may be from Chicago, but I live in Scottsdale now, so I'm not ready for this anymore.
I'm more accustomed to it. This is warmer than what I would have otherwise, yeah.
Trevor, you get to kick things off today with your offensive top performer of the day. So who stood out to you on the offensive side of the ball?
It's a little bit of a sleeper, but I'm going to say Caleb McGarry, the offensive tackle. I thought he had a really good day, and he's a guy who I didn't really know how to peg on tape a lot of the way that I was watching him, but I thought at the Senior Bowl, okay, this is an opportunity. You're going up against some decent edge rushers. You've got a chance to really prove yourself, and I thought he did. And I especially thought he did on the third day. And Kyle and myself wrote some pieces called How to Scout the Senior Bowl.
Right.
We did offense and defense, and the one thing about offensive line is you got to remember, this is such a chemistry-based position. You've got to know what your other offensive linemen next to you are doing.
Right.
That's why you're able to take on edge rushers the way that you are. So it's tough that in the early days, some of these one-on-ones that you go up against, it's tough to really show your stuff. But when you can on the last day, that tells me that you can adapt as an offensive lineman. You know what chemistry is like with these guys. You can bond with them. You can block with them. And I thought Caleb McGarry did a really good job of that today.
Ben, on the offensive side of the ball, who was your top performer of the day?
Oh, man, I'm excited. Dax Raymond, tight end out of Utah State.
Name.
No,
great name.
He's a great player. And Raymond benefited a lot from an early dropout. Alize Mack, tight end out of Notre Dame, is a player who I think would have been the best pass-catching tight end here, but he drops out. Now it's Dax Raymond.
Yeah.
All right, and tight ends win in two separate ways, either with athleticism or with intelligence. And Raymond's not going to be an athleticism sort of guy. He's not super quick, but he's no nonsense. He gets into his breaks right away. Up the stem, up the field, turn, go find the football. And when he gets leverage on you, he gets positioning. He's between you, the defender, and the football. You're not getting around him. He's physical. He's long, right? We're talking about 6'5", 249. He's got big mitts as well. He catches the football nicely away from his frame. So, again, not a guy who's going to separate, but hey, like Zach Ertz isn't that dude. Greg Olsen wasn't that dude, but they still are able to win. I think Raymond has that ability
Everybody
as well.
thinks you got to separate, and separation is great. Obviously, it makes it easier, but there are tons of guys that can catch through traffic in the NFL. You find
the reason Gronk is amazing is because you don't build them like him. So you got to be able to win in different ways.
Yeah, you can't build them like him. That is true. Defensive side of the football, who is your top performer of the day?
I had a couple of guys, but a guy that really stood out to me on the third day was Rocky Sin, the cornerback.
Great name.
I think we're just picking nice names. I think that's what we're doing now.
His name for the first time was like Rocky Sin. That
can't be bad.
There's got to be like two different nicknames. It's not. It's his name, but he is a guy who I was a little disappointed in the measurements because he came in under 6 foot.
Yeah.
I mean, I was even hoping he might have been 6'1". He comes in at 5'11", because his frame, it's longer. You could tell that he's rocked up, all pun intended, I guess. We're firing off on this last day. But he plays a man coverage style where he really gets into you. He likes to be physical. He likes to play with that length, and that's why you're kind of hoping that he was a little bit longer than that, just because you know that's his style. You want him to create that separation in between his guys. But the style, I think, is there to succeed also in the NFL. As we're seeing defenses get more and more aggressive with offenses ramping up their speed, finding mismatched players, you've got to take more chances as a defense. It's not as much about the yards anymore, nearly as much as it is about creating turnovers. You just have to take your chances.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to Rocky Sin, he's shown us over the last 2 days, but I especially think that today, he's a guy that you can play out an island, give him a man coverage assignment, whether it is true man or cover 3, something like that, and he can be dependable out there. He can go get yourself some turnovers. He can shut down some of the better receivers that the other teams in the NFL have to offer.
Ben, your top defensive performance of the day, who was that for you?
Man, I got to take lumps on this one.
Oh, boy.
I'm scouting the Pac-12. I'm scouting Marquise BLAIR, the safety out of Utah, and let me tell you, I didn't like him.
Oh,
I
boy.
didn't think he was a strong player. Now, he comes in a peculiar size. Guy's 6'2", 180. So he's thin, he's got thin hips, and his hands are only 8 inches, which is really small for a defensive back. And he's not playing a lot of true free safety, which is what he did at Utah, running around the back end of the field, filling the alley uphill. No, they're doing a lot of coverage stuff with the safeties because they don't have a lot of corners here. And he's covering really, really well, much better than I would have anticipated. He's quicker than I thought, especially for a guy who's so high-waisted. So now if Marquise Blair is a guy who can take away tight ends, who he can stick with slots and man coverage, he's disruptive within 5 yards, he attacks the catch point well. Well, now he's got a new role in the NFL that I don't think he really filled in Utah. So opened my eyes. A lot of safeties in coverage this week, and I thought Blair was one of the best ones out there. Again, not something I would have anticipated coming out from the Utes. So this is now a return to tape situation. Sometimes the Senior Bowl makes us do that, makes us go back to the tape and say, hey, you know, he showed something we didn't expect.
Yeah.
We got to go check it out now through the new frame, the new lens, and see if he has an NFL role that I didn't anticipate.
Jim Nagy spoke highly of him going into the week, and so
called him a Seattle safety, which usually those guys don't cover. So I'm not sure if anybody thought this was.
That's a good point.
We love a good surprise. You said you got to go back to the tape, so that's what we're going to next. A surprise standout this week. Somebody you came into the week, you said, I'm not really excited about. Who was that guy this week?
Well, a guy that I kind of highlighted as we went into the week is Byron Cowart. He's a defensive end from Maryland. He's a former #1 overall recruit in the country, okay? So anytime you have that billing with you, you know you've got a lot of talent.
Yep.
And the thing is that he is such a big dude, and he moves so well for his size, which is why he's very alluring to NFL teams, and you can see it this week. But what was surprising, what makes him a surprise to me, is that he was an edge rusher at Maryland. He spent some time at Auburn as well, but he was an edge rusher there. They're playing him at 3-tech a little bit. They were kicking him inside. They were giving him some interior defensive line assignments, and he was actually doing it really well. And so that's why he was a surprise, especially today on day 3. He was taking on a lot, some of the better interior offensive linemen that the Senior Bowl had to offer, and he was doing pretty well against it. He was able to use that speed and that size to be a true mismatch player, and that's what I'm really looking forward to. That anytime a guy either has a mismatch with speed or with size, he can combine them both. And I thought he was kind of a terror on that inside today. Those interior defensive linemen or offensive linemen didn't even know what to do with him, and so that's why he was a surprise to me, because they were playing him at a different position than what he came in as. But he really succeeded today, I thought.
This is my favorite thing to talk about. I love the guys who come in and you guys aren't expecting them to be as great, and then they stand out. These are the best storylines for me. So who is that guy for you, Ben?
He's a guy who teased us with his tape, and he teased us out here. Not strong day 1, not a strong day 2. BRADY, wide receiver out of Marshall. You heard a lot of small school wide receivers already mentioned. Penny Hart, Andy Isabella, you know. We got Travis Fulgham out here. There's a small school guys. Brady's out of Marshall. And then he dominated some of the competition that he saw in Conference USA. But again, so much inconsistency. A great hands catch and then an easy drop. You know, really sharp routes and then a lazy route run. I don't really understand what you're putting out on tape. Well, here day 3, some fantastic red zone catches. And he won the weigh-in as well. You might miss it. You know, it doesn't look as strong, but over 6'2", over 200 pounds. We got arm length near 34 inches, 10-inch hands. Dude is big. He's got great size. And so now when we look at what he could look like in the pros with his foot speed and his size, I think about a player like Mohamed Sanu with the Atlanta Falcons. That's his ceiling, right? Sanu is one of the best wide receiver 2s you're going to find in the league. Again, not the wide receiver 1, but really consistent inside-outside versatility, gives you a great intermediate threat. Brady can snap off his routes like that. Sanu's got quick feet. Brady's got quick feet. And so if he can find a little more consistency, if he can find a little more regularity, he's going to be a guy. I like him a lot.
I like that. I like you. You're dropping Mohamed Sanu, and I'm already going to fantasy football. I'm already talking about how rookies can make impact in fantasy. You're going to have people going. You're going to have people going out on.
People are going to be in your mentions.
Must be why I'm really bad at fantasy football.
Yes.
Don't tell them that now. Don't tell them that right now.
Listen to me for the fantasy football takes, not to Ben. Trevor, any parting thoughts on today? Because we've reached the end of the show. We've reached the end of our Senior Bowl coverage in general, but any parting thoughts?
Receiver class, I know we touched on it in the first section, but they were so good this week. I thought everybody, they really showed out. They were truly the position that you wanted to covet. So if your team needs a wide receiver,
there's a few of you.
There's a few of them here that could very well have been at the Senior Bowl. So make sure you're checking out all the coverage there that we kind of provided.
Looking at you, Arizona Cardinals. What's going on?
Listen, to that point, quarterback class disappointed generally, and you hate to see it. Obviously, you know, they're the premier position. Teams want to find the good ones. The Raiders have got 2 big names in there, but I thought everybody, even the guys who you knew weren't even that strong coming in, even looked weaker than I anticipated. Only player who I'd say at least kept his stock where it was would probably be Drew Lock. I don't think he hurt himself too much. much Daniel Jones. Really a disappointing week. You hate to see it. So, hey, maybe those wide receivers are even better than we think because they weren't getting many accurate balls.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of great quarterback play, but guys, I just want to say thank you. It's been a lot of fun. We've reached the end of our video coverage, but guys, you are going to want to continue to go to thedraftnetwork.com because the written content is never over. You should be visiting that website every single day, and I can say that because I'm not the one writing, so I can pump it up for everybody else. I'm not the one doing the writing. So visit thedraftnetwork.com every day. Make sure you're listening to the podcast, and we will be back at the NFL Combine with some more video coverage. Thank you for joining us, and have a good night.